Hi guys, welcome back. I'm Anna, a psychologist in training. Today we're talking about anxiety tips and tricks. This channel is all about real life applications to psychology. If that is your type of thing, I hope you decide to stay. So these are just some tips and tricks for managing anxiety as a therapist and a person who struggles with anxiety myself. Unfortunately, there's no magic pill or hack for anxiety. The only highly effective anxiety medications kind of rot your brain, and antidepressants are somewhat effective for anxiety. They can be very helpful for some people, but they're by no means a magic wand that you just wave in front of you. So these are just some tips that are scientifically proven to help and have been helpful for me personally as well. If you want an overview of all the different types of anxiety, I have a video on that up here, I think. I never know which side to point at. I also have a whole playlist on anxiety which already contains some tips, but this video will be more comprehensive. So let's get right into it. The first step that is really important for any anxiety disorder is grounding. Grounding skills are basically meant to, like it sounds, ground you, tether you to the present moment. What's going on externally, what's going on internally, your body awareness, mental awareness, something to ground yourself to when you're feeling very anxious. Oftentimes, grounding skills use sensory awareness and mindfulness, and that's usually more related to what's going on around you. Some of them, like I mentioned, are more body focused. Some of them require concentrating on a specific task. There are lots of different skills. I'll put a few worksheets in the description box containing kind of different lists of grounding skills, but I do recommend practicing them with a therapist, as it really does make a world of difference in terms of tailoring it to your individual needs and troubleshooting what doesn't work. So some examples of grounding skills are 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, where you look at 5 things that you see around you, 4 things that you can feel, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, 1 thing you can taste, counting bones in your fingers, listing as many items in a category that you can think of, meditating, breathing, and so forth. It's important to practice grounding skills during a neutral time because you want to already know how to do it during times of stress. This is obviously really important. You wouldn't just go out driving on a highway the first time. You would obviously practice driving first in other neighborhoods. Breathing exercises sort of fall under grounding, but it can sort of also be its own category. There are different ways to pace your breathing. Some of them are 4-7-8 or 5-7-5. So the first one represents how long you inhale, second one represents how long you hold that for, and the third one represents how long you exhale for. There are also a lot of different apps out there, or even your Apple Watch has some paced breathing exercises. It's typically recommended that you exhale a bit longer than you inhale for. Breathe in through your nose from the stomach, not the chest. Try to breathe from down here, and exhale through puckered lips. So imagine that you are inhaling a nice petal, exhaling by blowing out a candle. It is proven to decrease your heart rate to do these breathing exercises. So if you're starting to feel physiologically triggered, it can be scientifically proven to be very helpful. But I will say it's not for everyone. There are some people who say breathing exercises tends to make them a little bit more anxious, actually more anxious than they were before. That used to be me. It's not me anymore. I think I sort of got the hang of it a little bit better. I know it's cliche, but breathing can be really helpful for some people. Then there's also progressive muscle relaxation, which is also sort of its own subcategory of grounding. It's where you basically tense up your muscles for 5 seconds and then release. It helps a lot before bed. It helps when you're feeling tense in your body. It helps ground you into your bodily sensations. You start from your feet and work your way up every muscle group all the way to your face and your neck. And then once you're done with that, you do all of the muscles at once. So again, tense and release without straining yourself. People tend to be a little resistant of it, but I will say I think most clients that I've done it with have really enjoyed it. I've really enjoyed it myself. It's truly kind of underrated. Once you give it a try, it does really help. Meditation, also sort of a grounding exercise, but also kind of its own thing. A lot of people think that meditation is to completely clear your head of any thoughts, and then they feel like they're failing when they can't do that. The truth is, no one can completely clear their thoughts. We all have an internal monologue that is not really stoppable. That's not the point of meditation. The point is to let thoughts come and go, to gently and non-judgmentally bring your attention back to whatever you're visualizing or breathing or grounding yourself into. There are a ton of meditation videos and podcasts and audios out there, and you might find one that works best for you. I know I used to hate meditation until I discovered a type of meditation that really goes deep, because the point for that is to kind of induce an out-of-body experience, which is definitely not for everyone. It kind of has a different reason why I do it as well, but basically the point of what I do is to kind of make myself go into sleep paralysis in order to induce that out-of-body experience. And it does require quite a long period of meditation to get into that. But for you can do something much simpler, like 5 to 10 minutes meditation. Doesn't have to be as intense. Then another skill that's really important for anxiety is cognitive diffusion. This is basically a set of techniques to help you detach from your thoughts, to remind you that you are not your thoughts, that they are not necessarily true, and that you can just acknowledge their existence. It's a way of not letting your thoughts have so much power over you, of just letting them come and go. You can't control your thoughts, but you can control how you interact with them. So some techniques of cognitive diffusion are writing your thoughts on paper, labeling your thoughts, thinking of them as metaphors, saying them in a really funny voice. Like I like to have my clients put whatever worries them into Google Translate, and then hearing the robot say it over and over and over again. That's usually pretty silly and kind of takes away the power from them. Again, I'll put some worksheets for cognitive diffusion in the description box below. Then gradual exposure is also really important for anxiety. The more you avoid doing something, the more your fear grows. Like, let's say that I have social anxiety. Every single time I decide to avoid a social situation because it makes me anxious, it sets me up for failure in the future. If you want to do your future self a favor, present self has to go through a little bit of discomfort and pain. Staying in your comfort zone will not keep you comfortable. It will only serve as a cage. And every time you're forced to leave that comfort zone, you will be in a great deal of distress. So if you want to live a full anxiety-free life, don't try to make your life as comfortable as possible. Don't try to control your surroundings to keep you comfortable, but rather take controlled risks. Welcome discomfort, throw yourself into new surroundings that don't have your safety buffers. It can be helpful to do an exposure hierarchy here, and again, I do recommend doing this with a therapist because they can help you get really specific in the nitty-gritty, like going outside downtown for half an hour, walking by the river for half an hour, going outside to the supermarket for 15 minutes, like really getting you to rate what is your anxiety level in all these really specific situations, and then ranking them from least to most anxiety-inducing. You can just do flooding, where you just start from the most anxiety-inducing thing and just completely throw yourself out there. That's much more difficult than gradual exposure, and you might back out of it. It might really scare you, and generally it's considered much more gentle to build on your successes. So I do recommend starting from the bottom and then working your way up slowly. Then there's de-catastrophizing. I do have a video kind of all about this topic, so I'll put a card for that up here somewhere. Basically, you want to be putting your thoughts on trial and seeing this worry that I have, this catastrophic thought that I have. What is the evidence that it's going to happen, and what is the evidence that it's not going to happen? And really try to get down to what is the worst case scenario that could happen here, and you know what, is that the most realistic case scenario, or is there something else? And even if it were the most realistic case scenario, could I handle it? Could I still live? Could I survive this? Is it that bad of a problem? Kind of a subtype of cognitive restructuring and de-catastrophizing is cognitive challenging your irrational anxious thoughts. My video on cognitive distortions kind of gives you an idea of where you can start with that. But again, this is something that a therapist is very helpful with. And then the last part of this video, I'm just going to talk about daily habits, not really like skills or techniques per se, but day-to-day things you can do to help with anxiety. First of all, so we'll start at the beginning of the day. Don't have too much caffeine. It does increase your heart rate, and your body sometimes misinterprets physiological symptoms. So if it feels that your heart rate is fast, it might send a signal to your brain saying, oh, you're actually feeling anxious. And even if you're not really feeling anxious, you're just feeling wired from the caffeine, that might trick your emotions. So don't have too much caffeine. I usually have about like one strong cup of coffee and then a matcha later in the day. But obviously it's very individual to individual. Some people have built up a tolerance to coffee. Some people don't drink any coffee at all. Just be mindful of what your threshold is that makes you anxious. I also recommend starting off your day with something slow and calming. Some things I like to do when I have the time include gratitude journaling, cuddling with my cat, reading. I know, like, obviously this is not doable for everyone, but if you can wake up a little earlier than usual to start your day off slow, that can be something that really sets you up for success the rest of the day. Gratitude is especially important, and especially for people with anxiety, since I think we tend to be pretty negative in our thinking, and so it can be very helpful to just focus on the positive, mindfully, consciously, actively. Radical acceptance, also helpful. I did also just recently make a video on this, so check that out. Basically, acknowledge that there are some things which are outside of your control that you need to accept. So check out that video for some concrete tips on how to do that. It can also be helpful to make a really detailed list for the day if you're one of those people that you can just kind of feel all your responsibilities hovering over you and you don't really know where to start. Making a list can be very helpful. Be careful if you have list making OCD or OCPD. That can turn into kind of perpetuating the problem if you're kind of feeding it and feeding those compulsions. But if you don't struggle with that, if you struggle with procrastination, because sometimes that can be a component of anxiety as well, it can be helpful to make a really detailed list and just notice yourself crossing those things out early in the day. Eating nutritious food also helps with mood. Eating lots of fruits, veggies, healthy fats, sufficient protein, a balanced diet of all the food groups. Check with your doctor to see if you could use some vitamin D. Vitamin D deficiencies can be really connected to lower mood. Magnesium can also be helpful. Deficiencies can cause things like muscle tension and/or anxiety. Probiotics can be helpful. Gut health is really connected to mood as well. So I would definitely ask your physician about those 3 things or other supplements that can be helpful for you. Also consider speaking to a psychiatrist or your primary care physician about whether psychotropic medications can be helpful for you. Although I did say that there's no like magic pill that can cure anxiety without serious repercussions, I have had many clients who have strongly benefited from antidepressants or beta blockers for anxiety who sometimes didn't even need to return to therapy once they got their neurotransmitters in check. So see if that's an option for you. Exercise, it's recommended typically at least 30 minutes 5 times per week. Before I got COVID, I was trying to fit in like at least 5 workouts of like 20 minutes cardio and 10 minutes strength or core, or just 30 minutes strength plus another 20 minutes of stretching plus whatever walking throughout the week. You don't have to be rigid with it, but it does release endorphins, which combat anxiety and also obviously improves your health, improves things like your heart rate, and that can also help with, like I mentioned, the feeling of anxiety, like feeling like you have a high heart rate and so you must be feeling anxious. Do try to implement multiple relaxing self-care components into every single day. A bath, lighting a candle, relaxing music, watching a feel-good show, spending time with loved ones, petting your cat, meditation, spending time in nature, journaling, cooking, dancing, etc. Again, I realize not everyone has this privilege. A lot of people are working so intensely that self-care is a fantasy, and I do want to really validate that for some people it is harder than others. But if something is a priority, you'll find some little time to do it throughout the day. So don't underestimate the importance of self-care, because you can't keep going if you have no more gas in the tank. You have to refuel every so often. Get a good night's sleep. I like to take a CBD melatonin gummy a couple times a week before the mornings when I have to get up a little earlier. I try to go to bed around 9:30 and wake up around 6. Cortisol levels are naturally highest in the morning, so they naturally wake me up that early, and going to bed early allows me to actually get in some rest before that happens. But see what schedule works best with you, with your work schedule or with your circadian rhythms. And don't drink too much alcohol or take illicit substances. The withdrawal of a substance is the opposite of its high. With alcohol, for example, which is a central nervous system depressant, after you come down from it, it actually increases your heart rate for a few hours. And that's why I know if I've had a couple drinks, my sleeping, resting heart rate is much higher than if I haven't been drinking that night before. Alcohol also makes it harder to get to the restful stages of sleep and may actually make you more anxious the next day because of that. It also tends to deplete your happy neurotransmitters the next day, so you might feel like you're waking up and thinking everybody hates me or I did something really embarrassing. That's actually something really common that I hear. It's not usually that you actually did something embarrassing. It's usually just that your brain's trying to catch up with the neurotransmitters that are kind of struggling. And of course, hangovers cause a great deal of anxiety as well. So if you do all of these things, it can really maximize your chances of lowering your anxiety. I know it requires a really concerted effort to do all of them, not just like a couple, like really trying to implement all the behavioral and cognitive and affective skills that you can. Is there something that I missed that you feel like helps you? If so, write those down in the comments down below. And if you found this video helpful, give it a thumbs up if you're okay with that. And other than that, hope you have a great day and I'll see you soon.